this video, I am going over the books I read in 2024. I had only just started filming videos where I was speaking, and my 2023 wrap-up I had to go in a bit more detail about the books that I'd read because I hadn't actually filmed anything or said anything about them, so it made it a lot longer. But we're going to try and make this not as long, not 40 minutes long like last time. And in saying that, I'm just going to get into it. I've broken them up into each month, so I've put them in piles, and I'll just go through each month quickly and tell you what I've read and go from there. And I think a cup of tea will be needed, honestly, to get through this. So these books are in order, which I'm pretty sure this is the exact order I read them in, and you know, if there's one or two that are a bit out of place, doesn't matter too much, you get the general idea anyway. So starting off with The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austen. I don't know if they're husband and wife, I feel like they might be, not 100% sure, but absolutely loved it. That was like top tier romance book that I'd read, and it was the first book of the year. I did love it, honestly, would recommend. Then I read Mortal Remains by Kathy Reach. This feels like I read this like last year, honestly. It feels like it's been that long since I've read it. Most of these I can't quite remember everything about because it has been so long and I've read so many books, but I love, honestly, if you ever find a Kathy Reach book, if you ever find one op shopping, especially in Australia, I know there's heaps of them here, I would recommend just buying one. If you buy a cheap one, like just testing it out and just seeing if you like it, because I absolutely love them. Every time I go to a op shop I try and find the books in the Bone series and just try and see if there's any that I don't have, and I just get them because I know I'm going to read them later and absolutely love them. So I would always recommend her books to anyone because they're just so good. She's a forensic anthropologist in real life, and her character does that as a job in the book, and it's just crazy. There's a lot of action, there's murders, they're trying to figure out what happened, mysteries, all this stuff, and I just love them. Alright, I'll keep going. Then I read 19th Christmas by James Patterson. This is a part of the Women's Murder Club series. I read that one because I found it at an op shop. I found two more at op shops. They're all going to be out of order when I read them. Doesn't matter too much to me, honestly, but if you want to read it, I'd suggest just reading it in order. But honestly, good. And then Heartstopper Volume 5, I cannot wait for Heartstopper Volume 6, the last one, to come out. Oh, I miss that series so much, I want to read it again. I think I will next year because it just has a special place in my heart. Next we've read The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. Absolutely love her books. I always find her books at op shops too. So Kate Morton books and Kathy Reach books I always find at op shops, and I just get them regardless because I love her books as well. Always has the craziest plot twist that, you know, it can get a little bit, become a bit slow just in terms of pacing, but then towards the end she will just hit you with plot twist after plot twist and your mouth is just on the floor because it's just, you don't expect it. I mean, I don't anyway, but I love her books so much and I would always recommend her books as well. And then I read Normal People by Sally Rooney and loved it. It was good. It was good. So that's the end of January, and some of these books I kept reading a little bit into the next month too, so just keep that in mind. But we're going to go into February now. In February I started off with Spy Family Volume 1. Absolutely loved it. I want to keep reading that series. My friend introduced me to it and I'm glad I picked it up when I did. I wish I picked it up earlier, but it's so good, so funny. If you want to laugh, I think that'll be a good book, and obviously there's the whole spy aspect of it too, so it was good to read. Then I read The Betrayals by Bridget Collins, and I don't have too much to say about it. It was good. I enjoyed it. It was like one of those books. Then I read Aussie Soldiers, Prisoners of War, which was very out of my comfort zone, honestly. I would like to read more books like this, learn a bit more about Australian history, kind of what we went through. It's hard to read, honestly. It was so hard to read, it was heartbreaking. But if it's just too much for you, I wouldn't recommend books like that because it was horrific, some of the stuff that's in here and the stories that they have told. Like I have goosebumps just thinking about some of those stuff and what they went through, but it was insane, honestly. Then we've got The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, a classic, very short, loved it, read it in school. It was good, it was a good time. And then I read The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, and I know this is very controversial, so in my wrap up I didn't say much about it at all, but I didn't mind it. Like, I can understand why it would be controversial and why people wouldn't like it either, so I can see that. I'm not going to recommend it to anyone. It's just like, if you want to pick it up, you pick it up. If you don't, it's completely up to you. I like the mystery aspect of it. That's, you know, I'm not going to talk about the other stuff, but the mystery aspect, really good, done nicely. And we're going to go on to March now. Starting off March, pretty strong. I'm going to clip this to my shirt because I won't be able to hold all these up at the same time otherwise. But I read the first 3 books in the Mortal Instrument series, and I have a video up on my channel of me reading the first 3 books. If you do want to see that, I can try and link it somewhere down below. But I loved it. Still love the Shadowhunter world, honestly. I would recommend it. It's also got a bit of controversy, the author does anyway, but if you separate yourself from those things and just read the book, I do understand why. Like, there is a lot of controversy about certain things and certain authors and what they've written and how it's not very good for certain people to read, or certain age groups. Obviously understand all that, but as a whole, as a fantasy series, it's very good and I did enjoy it. There's a lot of action. It wasn't that bad at all, honestly, and probably recommend it if you're a bit older, but everyone has their own taste. And lastly, in March, I read The Power by Naomi Alderman, and this was a part of a book club series, book pick. Words are hard. So yes, I had a book club with a couple of friends for a little while, and we picked this book as one of them, and it was very interesting, like very political, a bit of talk about religion and stuff, and it was eye-opening to say the least. Then we're going on to April. April was a bit of a bigger reading month for me. I read about 7 to 8 books in that whole month, but we started off with The Ex-Hex by Eris Sterling, which I love. Like, it's up there with The Roughest Draft. Honestly, loved those romance books, but it was good. I loved it. And then I read The Royal Game by Anne O'Brien, and there is a second book to this, a sequel, which I am thinking about reading, but it's not on my priority list, or, you know, I don't have to read it yet, but it was alright. It was very political. It was just all talk about land and money and all that sort of stuff that would have happened back in the 1400s, so take that with, you know, as you will. But I then read The Little Shop of Hopes and Dreams by Fiona Harper, and this looks very much like a Christmas book, but there's not much mention of Christmas or the scenery or just the Christmas vibe in general. It barely feels like it is Christmas in this book, but I did like it. It is a romance book. It is, you know, if you take that aspect out of it and expect it to be very Christmassy and festive and all about the holiday season, it's not really going to be about that. So, you know, if you want to read it, you can, but it wasn't too bad. I think it's about a person who does proposal planning, I think, and then meets the love interest through that, but not bad, not a bad book to read. Then I read You May Now Kill the Bride, which is a part of the Return to Fear Street series, which is in some universe. There's like, apparently there's so many books in this universe by R.L. Stine, and I really liked it. It has a past and present timeline, and so you're figuring out kind of this like family curse that's happening and why it's happening and how to stop it, basically. And then I read Restore Me, I read Shadow Me, and then I think I read Defy Me, and then Reveal Me. If that's not correct, you can correct me down below. But I read these 3/4 books in the Shadow Me series. That's rough. But yeah, I enjoyed these two. Like, these books go so fast, and it is dystopian, all that sort of good stuff. I would recommend that series as well if you want a quick fun, fast-paced read that is dystopian, that is quite action-packed, there is romance, there's all that sort of stuff that you would enjoy in a fantasy book. I would recommend those 100%. And then it is on to May. Honestly, May was a pretty good reading month, if I say so myself. I enjoyed most of the books that I read this month, like pretty much all of them. I read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas, and honestly loved it. I've fallen in love with this series ever since I read this book. I have been keen to read all of them, and I've officially finished all of the books that are published. I always recommend that series. Honestly, it's amazing. Fantasy series, like peak. And it's like Beauty and the Beast retelling, the first one is. I've also heard, I think Hayley Pham say that as well. So like, I don't really know too much about the background of it, but I just fell in love with the series after reading it and would recommend. Then I read The Prisoner's Throne by Holly Black, and this is the second book in the The Stolen Heir duology, sorry, which is a part of the Eltham universe, the Cruel Prince trilogy. Loved it, honestly, would recommend that whole world too. It's amazing. Like, I've definitely started to suss out what is for me and what isn't, and I have read so many books the last 2 years, because I never used to read this much. I read a lot, but not this much. Like, this is insanity for me to read like almost 60 books a year for the past 2 years, so I've definitely started to get used to my reading taste a lot more now, and I just love reading. I don't have too many negative things to say about books. Like, I'll tell you if I don't like it, but I won't go ranting about it. But anyway, moving on. I read Pride and Prejudice, which honestly, I will admit, it was hard to read, it was hard to get into, it was hard to just keep my focus on it for so long because it is a classic. It was hard to just keep the emotions going, keep everything going, keep my focus, but like, there were some things that happened and I was like, damn, alright, this is good, I love this, like, this was great. And then I watched the movie with Keira Knightley and it just made it so much better. But honestly, be patient when you're reading classics. They can end up being amazing. You just have to give it time, and you do have to concentrate, you have to use your brain a bit, but it is worth it in the end, and I did really like it. It took a while, but I did like it. And then we read Powerless by Lauren Roberts, and I've loved this series so much too. I can't believe this is her debut novel, and just how far she's come since she's released it, I should say, is just amazing and inspiring, and makes me want to continue writing my own book, like I always say. So would recommend this as well. I feel like this is like a dystopian kind of situation, fantasy. They've got powers, there's romance. It's basically like all the tropes that she loves she put into this series, so it's great. Loved it. Would recommend that too. And now on to June. Alright, so in the month of June I read the last 2 books in the Shadow Me series, and I will say it ended very nicely, and yeah, it was good. Loved it. Next I read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I am very keen to read all the books now that I've watched all the movies, and absolutely adored this first book, as everyone does, and I can see what the hype is about. Love it. I will always love Harry Potter and everything, and every time I watch the movies it's just brings me so much joy. I just love it. And then I read Dracula. This also took me a little while to get through, but always worth it in the end with classics, and would always recommend a good classic, like top tier classic. Then I read Homegoing, and this was also part of the book club group that I was in, and it was very eye-opening, and I have like no words for it, but it was just amazing to read, and it was hard in some parts to see even like what other cultures have gone through, even though it's a fiction book. There's characters that are from Africa. It follows these 2 sisters, and then it goes down like the family tree, so it goes like their children and their children's children kind of situation until the end of the book. And yeah, it was very, like I said, very eye-opening, and I would recommend that. And that's it for June. Next is July. I did not read many books in July. I only read 3, but they were some pretty interesting books. I read A Court of Mist and Fury, which is the Second book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series, absolutely loved it, would always recommend. And then I read Girl A by Abigail Dean. This was I think it was a psychotic thriller kind of situation, and it was very hard to read too. It's you know, this family, these kids that get treated very poorly, one girl escapes and her siblings, you kind of hear a little bit about their stories after everything that happened. Their parents were abusive and neglectful and everything like that, so they had a very, very tough childhood, and they got out of it, like their house of horrors basically, and it's very sad. Like, this book had me bawling my eyes out towards the end because I did not expect what happened in the end to happen, and it was heartbreaking. But I would always check trigger warnings with books like that, because you just don't know, like, that could trigger you and make you extremely upset. You might have had someone in your life that has been through a similar situation, or vice versa, you might have been in a situation like that, so just always check trigger warnings. But it was just a lot to read. It was a very heavy book, and I would just be careful with that sort of stuff, but it was good. The writing style was very good, and I didn't mind it. It was interesting. And then I read The Book of Hidden Wonders by Polly Crosby, and another interesting book. I got given it to me by a friend, and it wasn't too bad. I liked it, would recommend it. But, you know, there's a lot of books this year that are like, they're not too bad. You know, if you like, you like, you don't, you don't. And then next is August. I also only read 3 books in August, but you'll kind of see why in a second. I read Happy Place by Emily Henry and absolutely adored it. Can see what all the hype is about with Emily Henry. I have one of her books already, which is Book Lovers, and I absolutely love that book, and I would be keen to get a few more of her books in the future and read them, because I can see, like I said, I see what all the hype's about. And then I read Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre by the Bronte sisters. So Wuthering Heights is by Emily Bronte and Jane Eyre is by Charlotte Bronte, and this is 2 classics in one, and it took a while and it ended up being very good. Like, it's kind of similar to how I felt about Dracula and Pride and Prejudice. Took a while to get into. In the end, quite a few twists, quite a few turns, a bit of romance. I ended up really liking it, and just their writing is just incredible, honestly. And I can see what all the hype is about with their books too. And then lastly, for this month, I read The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I was intimidated by this. I never really thought I was going to read this series, honestly, this book and The Lord of the Rings, but I just read The Hobbit, and it was a lot easier to read than I thought it was going to be. It was less intimidating than I thought it was going to be. I'd watched the movies, and I thought I could understand it a lot better, and oh my god, I just loved it. I fell in love with this series like everyone else, and would always recommend it, to be honest. Like, it was amazing. And that's it for August, I think, going on to September. In September, I only read 1 book, but it was 3 books in one, and because I read The Hobbit, of course I had to follow it up with The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this is, we've got The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King in this 69 or 70 page book. It was a behemoth. It took me literally like 30 to 31 days to get through this thing, and holy moly, I mean, it was incredible. Like, I can never talk highly enough about this. I would recommend reading these books. It's like the original classic series. I've gone into detail in my other videos, but holy shit, it was amazing, honestly. Like, there were definitely parts that felt repetitive and it was a bit hard to concentrate, but honestly, it's so worth it to read it and just to push through. It 100% is. Like, I'll always recommend that series as well. And then on to October. This month I read 8 books, which is insane. I did not think I was going to read this many, but I read like 3 or so books in a week because I went away camping, and it was very easy to just get through them while we were sitting around relaxing. But first I read The Peculiar Life of a Lonely Postman, and I don't have too much to say about it. It was an interesting plot twist in the end, and it was just an interesting book overall, and I would recommend it. But it's been translated from French and it is very odd but very good. Then I read Friends, Lovers and The Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry, and also I found it very interesting reading his story after everything that happened, and it was also very eye-opening, and I am glad that I read it and finally kind of understand what he went through. It was just very tragic to say the least, and just very hard to read in some parts, but you know, it's what happened and here we are. I read it, it was very good and I would recommend it. Then I read The Great Gatsby, and another classic. Didn't take me long to read. I did enjoy it, and I feel like I read it once. Like, it just all seemed very familiar to me, but I don't think I have read it yet, so, well, until that point, but it was good. Then I read The Diary of a Nobody by George Whedon and Grossmith. So it was interesting. Like, it's literally what it says in the name, a diary of a nobody. You're just following this man do his day-to-day life. His son comes to visit. It's like him and his wife go to balls and all this sort of stuff, him going to work, like literally everyday life. And it was good though, like it wasn't too bad. It was just one of those books I picked up from an op shop and thought it'd be interesting to read. And then I read Reckless by Lauren Roberts and fell in love with these characters even more than I already had in the first one, and just, oh, it was great. Like, loved it. I cannot wait for the last book to come out and see what happens, because that plot twist at the end, holy moly, did not see that coming one bit, but it was good. And then I'm going to clip this to my shirt again because I'll need my hands. I read books 4, 5 and 6 of the Mortal Instruments series, which I also have a video up on my channel of me reading all 3 of these books and my review and everything, so you can go check that out. But it was good, like, I finished it. She's complete. On to the next one. Then it is November. In November I read The Nurse's War. I'm going to move on from this pretty quickly, because if I don't, I'm not going to shut up about it. It was amazing. Would highly recommend it. It's about nurses in World War One, and it is fictionalized, but is based off true stories and true people's experiences. So it was just eye-opening, amazing, especially going into the nursing industry. I would recommend reading that book. It was just so amazing and eye-opening. And then I read Dororo, I think, which I found this book at an op shop, and I just was like, oh, I like Spy Family, like, you know, I thought I would try another bit of manga and just see how it went. It was interesting. If I ever find any other books, I'll pick them up, but it's not also on my priority list either, just go through this series, but it was good. It was interesting. And then I read The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Also found this at an op shop. Also thought I would just give it a try because it is so hyped up on TikTok, and just another romance book, but did enjoy it. I had a good time reading it. Can't lie. Then I read A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is the 3rd book in the Okata series. This one's about the war. It's just, it goes straight into it in this book. Oh my god, like you're already in the world. You might as well just get thrust straight back into it, and it was amazing. And just like I said with The Beast and Fury, I don't know what crack was in that book, but it was amazing, and I would recommend as always. And lastly, we are going into December. So for December I read A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is the 4th book in the Okata series, and just a little novella to you know, show what happened after the war. It wasn't really plot heavy or action packed or anything, but it was very nice paced and just a nice thing to read during the holidays. It did feel very festive, and yeah, it was good. It wasn't too bad. Then I read Inner Holidays by Christina Lauren, another book I found at an op shop, and thought I would give it a try, and absolutely loved it. I loved that book, honestly. It was actually very good. It's up there with The Roughest Draft and the other one I mentioned earlier, which I loved and would recommend. And then I finished, like a couple days ago, A Court of Silver Flames, and this brings me to the end of the Okata series for now, until she brings out the next one. But I just finished filming a video for this, so I'll leave it to that. But amazing. And literally just yesterday, I think I started this morning. I just finished this morning, and I started it yesterday, and that is Powerful by Lauren Roberts, which is the novella about Adina and her story, which oh my god, it was hard to read in the first book and it was very hard to read in this book, and I bawled my eyes out. Honestly, I knew it was coming, but it was still extremely sad to read about. But I loved hearing her story and what happened while Peyton was in the trials and when she was in the slums by herself and everything, and just what happened. So it was very good and I'm glad I read it. And about this book, this one's about, I haven't done a December wrap up, so I'm kind of adding it into this video, but it's like a Groundhog Day situation. This girl lives the same day over and over, well actually the same week over and over, but there wasn't a lot to do with like that Groundhog Day situation. Like yes, she does live the week over, but it doesn't happen as much as you would think it does, and I kind of wish she'd kind of lived it a couple more times just to add to that theme of what this book is about. And it is a romance book. It is set in the holidays. It was very festive. I loved reading it. My childhood friends to lovers, and so they grew up together, and yeah, it was just very good and I would recommend this book for sure. And then currently I have just started Tidings of Death at Honeychurch Hall, which I think is like the 6th Honeychurch Hall mystery book, but I just found this at an op shop as well and I was like, that looks interesting, I'll just read it. And I thought I would add it in this video because I'm hoping to get it done by the end of this year. I only have like 4 more days left of the year and I would like to have just 1 more book finished by then. And it's basically 10 days before Christmas and there is I think 2 murders that happen, and it's basically about a girl just kind of figuring out what happened and solving the mystery. It kind of reminds me of when I read An Unholy Whiff of Death, and I'm hoping that it's like a similar style where it's very fast paced and it, you know, there's not too much high stakes I don't think, but we're gonna see how it goes. Maybe I can do a little bit of a review next year when I finish it, but this is what I'm currently reading. And that is all the books I have read in 2024. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had a good year of reading, and there's still more to come. That is it. That's the end of the video. I will see you guys next year. Have a happy new year, and yes, see yous.